Aachen, Germany, October 1944. The 1st Infantry Division, after weeks of grinding combat through the West Wall, believed the city's resistance had finally fractured. Their advance elements, having breached the outer defenses and pushed into the urban core, reported diminishing returns from German artillery and small arms fire, suggesting a collapse of coordinated defense. This perception that the siege was nearing its conclusion carried with it the critical assumption that the subsequent phase would be one of consolidation and mopping up, a shift in operational tempo that would profoundly impact troop deployment and resource allocation. Major General Clarence Hübner, commanding the 1st Infantry Division, had been reviewing the latest intelligence summaries just after 0400 hours, noting the decreasing frequency of enemy contact reports from the forward companies. The initial, furious German response to the American penetration had seemingly waned, replaced by scattered pockets of resistance that appeared increasingly isolated. His staff, poring over aerial reconnaissance photographs and prisoner interrogations, corroborated this assessment, highlighting the visible damage to key German command and control centers and the reported depletion of frontline infantry units. The initial American thrust had been met with a ferocity that belied the city's strategic encirclement. German forces, despite being cut off, had utilized the dense urban environment to their advantage, transforming every building into a potential strongpoint. Engineers from the 102nd Engineer Combat Battalion had documented the extensive use of improvised barricades, reinforced concrete emplacements, and interconnected cellar systems, all designed to channel and ambush American forces. Each block gained had cost the 1st Division an average of 12 men killed or severely wounded, a rate that, while unsustainable for the defenders, also slowed the attackers to a crawl. Hübner's operational plan, based on the perceived weakening of German resolve, now called for a more aggressive push, leveraging the numerical superiority of his infantry and the increasing availability of tank support. The assumption was that the remaining German forces were disorganized and seeking avenues of escape, rather than preparing for a renewed, concerted defense. This shift in tactical thinking, from siege warfare to urban assault, was predicated on the belief that the enemy's heavy weapons, particularly their formidable 88mm anti-aircraft, anti-tank guns, had either been destroyed or withdrawn. Damage assessments from captured positions indicated a high percentage of heavy weapons knocked out, with 14 documented 88mm gun emplacements confirmed neutralized by direct fire or aerial bombardment. The German defenders, however, had not simply evaporated. Instead, under the leadership of Colonel Gerhard Wilk, the remnants of the 246th Volksgrenadier Division and various ad hoc combat groups had begun a systematic repositioning. Rather than retreating, they were consolidating their remaining heavy assets within the most resilient structures of the city center, often in buildings previously assessed as cleared or too heavily damaged to serve as effective strongpoints. This deliberate deception, creating the illusion of a general collapse, was a calculated risk designed to draw American forces deeper into a prepared killing zone. The quiet that had settled over parts of Aachen was not the stillness of defeat, but the tense calm preceding a trap. Aachen, October 1944. The 1st Infantry Division, having breached the outer defenses, now pressed inward, a relentless tide of armor and infantry. Their objective, the ancient city itself, was now largely encircled, its remaining defenders compressed into a shrinking pocket. The American command, reviewing aerial reconnaissance and forward scout reports, concluded the noose was tight, the city effectively isolated. The 30th Infantry Division, positioned to the north, had linked with elements of the 1st to the south, completing the investment. Road networks leading east, vital for resupply or retreat, were now under American artillery observation and interdiction fire. Unit logs from the 117th Infantry Regiment recorded the destruction of 3 German supply trucks attempting to break through the cordon on October 13th. Their cargo of ammunition and rations never reaching the beleaguered garrison. This interdiction confirmed, in the minds of many, the success of the encirclement. The tactical assessment, disseminated from 19 Corps headquarters, indicated a collapsing German resistance within the city. Intercepted radio traffic, though garbled, suggested a breakdown in command and control among the defenders. Prisoner interrogations, conducted by intelligence officers from the First Army, yielded consistent accounts of dwindling supplies and low morale. One captured NCO from the 246th Volksgrenadier Division stated simply, "We are cut off." This sentiment reinforced the growing conviction that the final push would be a matter of mopping up scattered pockets rather than a sustained urban battle. The American advance had been methodical, employing a deliberate house-to-house clearing strategy in the outlying districts. Sherman tanks, their 75mm guns spitting high explosive rounds, systematically reduced strong points. Infantry, supported by flamethrower teams, cleared cellars and upper floors. The expectation was that this pattern would continue, albeit with diminishing returns, until the last German position surrendered. The engineering battalions were already preparing routes for the logistical tail, anticipating the need to establish supply dumps within the city limits. The sheer weight of American material brought to bear on Aachen was immense. Production logs from Detroit indicated that by October, the monthly output of M4 Sherman tanks had exceeded 1,200 units, with a significant proportion earmarked for the European theater. Artillery shell production, measured in the hundreds of thousands weekly, ensured that no German position, once identified, could withstand a sustained barrage. This overwhelming industrial capacity underpinned the confidence in a swift resolution. The strategic importance of Aachen, as the first major German city to be directly assaulted, amplified the desire for a rapid conclusion. Its capture would serve as a powerful symbolic victory, a tangible demonstration of Allied progress deep into the Reich. Commanders, looking at their maps, saw the green arrows of their advance converging, the red lines of German defense shrinking, and concluded that the city's fate was sealed, its remaining defenders merely delaying the inevitable. The morning light, filtered through the lingering dust, illuminated the shattered cityscape of Aachen. Reports from forward elements, compiled at 07 hours on October 13th, indicated a significant reduction in organized resistance. The 1st Infantry Division's intelligence summaries noted a sharp decline in machine gun fire and a marked decrease in coordinated infantry assaults against their positions. This shift suggested a systemic collapse of the German defensive structure within the city's remaining pockets. American commanders, reviewing these assessments at their divisional headquarters, began to formulate plans for the final consolidation. The sustained bombardment by 155mm howitzers and 240mm mortars over the preceding 72 hours had pulverized many of the city's fortified buildings, and aerial reconnaissance photographs, analyzed at 0830, showed extensive damage to known strongpoints. The expectation was that the remaining German forces, isolated and without resupply, would soon capitulate. The tactical assumption, based on these indicators, was that the siege was entering its terminal phase, moving from active combat to a mopping-up operation. Logistical preparations commenced for the processing of prisoners of war and the establishment of civilian relief points. Medical units were alerted for a projected increase in wounded, both Allied and German, as the fighting concluded. Engineers began surveying routes for clearing debris, anticipating the need to restore vital supply lines through the city. The operational tempo, while still high, shifted subtly from aggressive assault to methodical occupation, reflecting the perceived change in the battlefield's dynamics. The 1st Battalion, 26th Infantry Regiment, advancing cautiously through the rubble-strewn streets, encountered only sporadic small arms fire. Their progress, meticulously logged in unit diaries, was measured in blocks rather than yards, a significant improvement over the previous day's grinding advance. The absence of anti-tank obstacles in several key intersections, previously heavily defended, further reinforced the belief that German resistance was dissolving. This pattern of weakening defenses, observed across multiple sectors, lent credence to the overarching assessment of imminent victory. At 10:45, a company of the 18th Infantry Regiment, pushing towards what they believed to be a final German strongpoint near the central market square, reported minimal opposition. Their lead elements, moving past the skeletal remains of a church, observed no immediate hostile activity. The silence, punctuated only by the distant rumble of American armor, seemed to confirm the intelligence estimates. The battle for Aachen, it appeared, was all but over. Aachen, October 1944. The initial American assessment, based on the cessation of organized small arms fire and the absence of forward German patrols, indicated a collapse of the city's defenses. Tactical quietude, however, was a deceptive veil, a strategic pause rather than a surrender. The 1st Infantry Division's advance elements, pushing cautiously through the debris-choked avenues, reported only sporadic, uncoordinated resistance, leading to a preliminary conclusion that the remaining German forces were fragmented and largely ineffective, a mop-up operation awaiting. The true nature of the remaining German strength, its disposition and capabilities, remained concealed within the very fabric of the ruined city. The German command, anticipating the American push into the urban core, had meticulously prepared a series of interlocking defensive positions, leveraging the destruction wrought by earlier bombardments. Crucially, they had repurposed their formidable 8.8-centimeter Flak 18, 36, 37, and 41 anti-aircraft guns. These weapons, originally designed to engage high-altitude bombers, possessed a high muzzle velocity and a flat trajectory, making them devastatingly effective against ground targets, particularly armored vehicles. Interrogation files from captured German artillerymen later confirmed that specific flak batteries, initially deployed to defend against Allied air superiority, had received direct orders to reconfigure their fire control systems for anti-tank and anti-personnel roles within the urban environment. Each 88mm gun, weighing approximately 5,000 kilograms in its combat configuration, was painstakingly moved into pre-selected positions. These locations were often within the reinforced basements of larger buildings, or cunningly disguised amidst collapsed structures, their long barrels camouflaged by rubble and tarpaulins. Production logs from Krupp and Rheinmetall indicate that over 13,000 of these guns had been manufactured by late 1944, ensuring a substantial inventory for such tactical redeployments. The tactical doctrine emphasized concealment and surprise, with engagement ranges often reduced to a few hundred meters, maximizing the kinetic energy transfer upon impact. The gun crews, often seasoned veterans, had adapted their training to urban warfare, understanding that their survival depended on the efficacy of their initial salvos. The strategic implication of these concealed 88s was profound. American armored thrusts, designed to exploit breakthroughs and rapidly secure key objectives, would be met with an unexpected and overwhelming firepower. A single 88mm round, traveling at over 800 meters per second, could penetrate the frontal armor of an M4 Sherman tank with ease, often resulting in catastrophic internal damage and immediate crew incapacitation. Damage reports from subsequent engagements showed that 72% of all M4 Shermans hit by 88mm rounds suffered complete penetration, with a 90% probability of a secondary explosion or fire. This represented a significant shift in the urban combat dynamic, transforming what the Americans believed would be a relatively straightforward advance into a brutal, block-by-block attrition. The German objective was not to hold every street, but to inflict maximum casualties, bleeding the American advance and buying time for a larger strategic regrouping. The silence that had settled over Aachen was not the quiet of defeat, but the tense stillness preceding an ambush. The city itself, a labyrinth of broken masonry and twisted steel, had become a weapon, its ruins providing the perfect cover for a deadly unseen enemy. The unsuspecting American forces were about to learn that the battle for Aachen was far from over. The American advance, now a methodical clearing operation, had pushed into what appeared to be the final, broken layers of the urban defense. Damage reports from the preceding days had catalogued the destruction. 85% of structures within the designated zone showed significant structural compromise. 40% were reduced to rubble piles exceeding 3 meters in height. Infantry units, moving with a practiced caution honed by weeks of street fighting, were consolidating positions, establishing forward aid stations, and preparing for the final anticipated surrender or collapse of the remaining German pockets. The air reconnaissance, conducted by P-38 Lightnings, flying at 10,000 feet, had confirmed the extensive devastation, noting only sporadic, small arms fire from isolated points. Then, without warning, the first 88mm rounds impacted. The initial strike, recorded at 14:17 hours by a forward observation post of the 3rd Infantry Division, struck a Sherman tank, M4A3 76W HVSS, positioned near a seemingly abandoned municipal building. The high-velocity, armor-piercing round, traveling at approximately 792 meters per second, penetrated the glacis plate, igniting the ammunition stowage. The resulting explosion ripped the turret from its hull, sending it an estimated 15 meters into the air before it crashed back down, a mangled ruin. This was not the sporadic, desperate fire of retreating infantry. This was coordinated, heavy-caliber artillery. Further impacts followed in rapid succession. A medical tent, clearly marked with Red Cross insignia, received a direct hit, killing 4 medics and 7 wounded soldiers. The 88mm Flak 36, originally designed as an anti-aircraft weapon, had proven its devastating effectiveness against ground targets throughout the war, its muzzle velocity and shell weight delivering a lethal combination of penetration and high explosive fragmentation. Intelligence estimates, based on captured material logs, had indicated a significant reduction in the availability of these weapons within the sector, with fewer than 10 operational units believed to remain. The source of the fire was immediately perplexing. The rounds were not originating from the expected, fortified positions on the city's perimeter, which had been systematically neutralized by preceding bombardments. Instead, they were emerging from within the very ruins the Americans had believed secured, from the skeletal remains of buildings thought to be empty, from rubble piles that had been meticulously cleared hours earlier. The trajectory analysis, conducted by artillery spotters, indicated firing positions at ground level or slightly elevated within the urban core itself. This suggested a deliberate and concealed deployment, a carefully prepared ambush. Casualty reports began to surge. Within the first 30 minutes, 14 Sherman tanks were disabled or destroyed, and 127 infantrymen were killed or severely wounded. The psychological impact was profound. The perceived end of the siege had been shattered by an enemy that had seemingly materialized from the very debris of their own defeat. The 88mm, with its distinctive bark and devastating impact, became an immediate symbol of this unexpected resurgence, a cruel reminder that the battle for the city was far from over. The American command, having declared the major resistance broken just hours before, now faced the chilling reality of a deeply entrenched, hidden enemy. Jülich, February 1945. The 102nd Infantry Division, having breached the Ruhr and secured the western bank, believed the city's organized resistance had collapsed. Forward elements of the 405th Regiment pushed through the rubble-choked streets, their M4 Shermans cautiously advancing, their commanders anticipating only scattered pockets of disoriented German infantry. The initial hours of the advance were met with sporadic small arms fire, easily suppressed, reinforcing the impression of a broken defense. Then, without warning, the first 8.8 centimeters rounds struck, not from the open fields beyond the city, where artillery was expected, but from within the skeletal remains of buildings that had been declared cleared. The distinctive, sharp crack of the Koenigstiger's KWK-43L-71 gun, or the equally devastating Flak 36, echoed from seemingly impossible positions. Damage reports from the 405th Regiment recorded the immediate loss of 3 Shermans and 2 M10 tank destroyers within a 30-minute span, all struck by heavy-caliber, high-velocity projectiles from concealed positions less than 300 meters away. These were not isolated, desperate shots. The German defenders, drawing on their experience from Stalingrad and the bitter street fighting in Aachen, had transformed the ruins into a complex, interlocking network of strongpoints. Interrogation files from captured Fallschirmjäger indicated that specialized demolition teams had created firing ports and reinforced positions within the bombed-out structures, often using the very rubble as additional protection. The high-velocity 88mm rounds, whether from dedicated anti-tank guns or repurposed flak pieces, possessed sufficient kinetic energy to penetrate the frontal armor of the M4 Sherman at these close ranges, often with catastrophic effect. The American command, initially expecting a swift mop-up operation, was forced to reevaluate the entire tactical situation. Intelligence summaries, compiled from aerial reconnaissance and prisoner debriefings, confirmed the presence of numerous heavy anti-tank assets still operational within the urban labyrinth. The enemy was not merely retreating. They were executing a deliberate, layered defense, leveraging the destruction wrought by Allied bombing to their advantage. The urban terrain, once seen as an impediment to German mobility, now served as an intricate shield and a platform for their most potent direct-fire weapons. This realization fundamentally altered the tempo and methodology of the American advance. The rapid, mechanized thrust gave way to painstaking, block-by-block assaults, often preceded by concentrated artillery barrages and supported by flamethrower teams. Every pile of debris, every shattered wall, became a potential ambush site, demanding a level of caution and resourcefulness that had not been anticipated for a city presumed to be on the verge of capitulation. The fight for Jülich had just begun anew, transformed from a pursuit into a siege. Aachen, October 1944. The initial American confidence that the city's resistance was broken proved tragically premature. As lead elements of the 1st Infantry Division pushed deeper, the expected collapse of German defenses did not materialize. Instead, the urban landscape itself became an extension of the Wehrmacht's will, a labyrinth of rubble and fortified structures that turned every street into a potential ambush. The belief that a swift, decisive assault would overcome the remaining pockets of resistance, largely based on earlier experiences in less dense, more open terrain, was shattered by the unexpected ferocity and organization of the German holdouts. The tactical shift began with an urgent reassessment of the intelligence failures that had underestimated the German resolve and the extent of their prepared defenses within the city. Damage reports, compiled from forward observer logs and aerial reconnaissance, indicated a significant discrepancy between the perceived destruction of German strongpoints and their actual operational capacity. Many structures, initially deemed unviable, were found to be mere shells concealing hardened positions, often with subterranean access and pre-sighted fields of fire. The 88mm anti-aircraft guns, repurposed for ground combat, were particularly devastating. Their high velocity and flat trajectory ideal for engaging tanks and infantry formations at street level. The sheer volume of these heavy weapons, previously thought to be concentrated on the city's perimeter, was revealed through captured documents and prisoner interrogations to be far more dispersed. Unit diaries detailed instances where American M4 Shermans, designed for maneuver warfare, found themselves outmatched in close-quarter engagements against these formidable cannons, often concealed within the skeletal remains of buildings. The typical American doctrine of overwhelming firepower and rapid advance, honed in the hedgerows of Normandy, proved ill-suited for the constricted, three-dimensional battlefield of Aachen's urban core. Casualties mounted, particularly among armored units, leading to a critical reevaluation of combined arms tactics within built-up areas. Commanders began to issue directives emphasizing methodical, block-by-block clearing operations, prioritizing infantry-led assaults supported by specialized engineering and flamethrower teams. The objective shifted from rapid penetration to systematic reduction of each fortified position. This necessitated a departure from the broad front advances, favoring instead highly localized engagements where small units could isolate and eliminate threats. The M1 Garand rifle, previously the mainstay of infantry firepower, was supplemented by automatic weapons like the M1918 Browning automatic rifle and the M1A1 Thompson submachine gun, better suited for the sudden, violent close-range encounters within buildings. The implementation of these new tactics was slow and costly, but demonstrably more effective. Engineers, equipped with demolitions and flamethrowers, became integral to every assault, tasked with breaching fortified walls and clearing stubborn strongpoints that artillery alone could not neutralize. Tanks, instead of leading the charge, were often relegated to providing direct fire support from a distance, or acting as mobile bunkers to suppress enemy positions while infantry advanced. The focus became less about destroying buildings and more about eliminating the personnel within them, often through brutal room-to-room fighting. The methodical nature of this new approach, though agonizingly slow, began to yield results, measured in the hard-won capture of individual buildings and street intersections. The fighting in Aachen became a crucible for urban warfare doctrine, forcing American commanders to adapt their entire operational philosophy. The expectation of a swift victory, predicated on the enemy's perceived weakness, gave way to the grim reality of a determined, deeply entrenched foe. The lessons learned in Aachen, paid for in blood and steel, would profoundly influence subsequent urban campaigns, demonstrating that the nature of warfare itself transformed when the battleground shifted from open fields to the dense, unforgiving landscape of a city. The city's ruins, once thought to signify defeat, became bastions of resistance, demanding a fundamental reimagining of American combat strategy. Aachen, October 1944. The sustained combat for the city had exacted a toll, far exceeding initial projections. Commanders had anticipated a swift engagement, a penetration of the Siegfried Line, and then a rapid advance into the German heartland. Instead, the urban terrain, riddled with determined defenders and reinforced structures, transformed the operation into a grinding attrition. The 1st Infantry Division, spearheading the assault, reported 5,000 casualties during the Aachen campaign, a figure derived from daily unit strength reports and field hospital admissions. This represented a substantial portion of its fighting strength, necessitating frequent rotations and the integration of less experienced replacements. The material cost paralleled the human sacrifice. Tank destroyers and Sherman tanks, designed for open-field engagements, suffered disproportionately in the narrow streets and close quarters. Damage reports filed by ordnance companies indicated that 112 armored vehicles, including 36 M4 Shermans and 18 M10 Wolverine tank destroyers, were rendered inoperable or destroyed within the city limits. This loss rate, recorded over a 10-day period of intense urban fighting, was nearly double the average for similar-sized engagements in less built-up areas, according to logistical summaries from the First Army. The close proximity of enemy anti-tank teams, often concealed in cellars or behind rubble, negated the advantages of armor and exposed their vulnerable side and rear plating. Artillery expenditure likewise soared. Fire mission logs from Corps headquarters revealed that over 140,000 rounds of various calibers, from 105mm howitzer shells to 240mm heavy artillery, were expended during the siege. This volume of fire, equivalent to a month's allocation for a full corps in a static defensive posture, was directed primarily at reducing fortified buildings and suppressing sniper positions. The sheer quantity of ordnance consumed underscored the challenge of dislodging an entrenched enemy without direct observation, often relying on grid coordinates and pre-registered targets. Each shell